What's up, DC Squad, and welcome back to my channel and to my late review of Brian Michael Bendis' The Man of Steel miniseries, and also issue number 1 of Superman. Let's get right into this one. So without doing the usual summarization that I would regularly do for a comic talk video, I just want to kind of talk about key points, some of the things that happened, and then how I feel about that stuff, and then how that connects into Superman issue number 1. So a lot of people were really up in arms and freaking out and upset about Brian Michael Bendis becoming the person who would helm Superman, which is a really big deal because Superman is one of the world's most beloved characters. And the idea of someone so controversial to many people helming that character, making a lot of the major decisions around that character, and having the ability, having the control, the creative control to make decisions that will affect the mythology of that character. Some of these being retcon, some of these being retroactively active decisions, in this case with the destruction of Krypton. Not only that, but he's also been able to decide who lives and who dies in some cases. Now, I understand that Brian Michael Bendis is trying to tell a story. That's his whole goal. He's a storyteller. He wants to tell a story that is interesting and exciting and that you want to come back and read every single issue. And if you can go back and you want to read every single issue, then he feels that his job as a storyteller is done. As far as I'm concerned, the very best Superman stories are the ones that hold the core principles and values and character traits of the Man of Steel. They hold that stuff intact firmly while presenting Superman with situations that are incredibly challenging and very difficult for him to make his way through. But in the end, it's all about telling a story. And it's the most memorable stories that end up becoming the stories that we remember for years to come. That we look back and go, I remember that story. I read that story 15 years ago, and at the time I hated it, but really it was actually pretty genius. So now let's look at Brian Michael Bendis and his handling of the Superman universe. So for starters, Brian Michael Bendis has introduced us to not one, but 2 characters in his time at the Superman helm. Rogol Zaar is a Brian Michael Bendis creation, and the same thing as Melody Moore, Metropolis's new fire chief. So we have 2 new characters in the Superman mythos, and it seems to me like Melody Moore is going to be one of those characters very much in the early 90s sort of Superman backup characters gallery. We're probably going to hear more about her. She's probably going to play a key role somewhere as well down the line, so I'm excited to see exactly what they do with her character. And then we have Rogol Zaar, and they've got him so intimately connected with, if we're to believe it so far, with the destruction of the planet Krypton, that I don't think he's just going to be a throwaway character. And let's face it, in the beginning, I think a lot of us really did believe that Doomsday himself was going to be a throwaway character. But look at him now. He's one of Superman's most favorite enemies in his rogues gallery. I think we can pretty much all say we love the Doomsday character. And I'm not sure if Rogol Zaar will raise to that, because Doomsday was very special in that he killed Superman in a very brutal, very dark way. And he was the catalyst. He was the beginning to a very long, very excellent Superman story. But definitely they're trying to make Rogol Zaar, I think, somewhat of a mainstay in the DC universe. I think that Brian Michael Bendis is trying to introduce a villain who will be around for quite a while. So 2 new characters invented in Brian Michael Bendis' run, which is pretty interesting if you ask me. That's a pretty gutsy move, to not introduce just 1, but 2 that seem like they're going to be around for a while. Another thing Brian Michael Bendis has done is eliminate the bottle city of Kandor from Superman's current mythos. Yes, it existed. It's not like it's been written out or retconned out. However, currently, it doesn't exist anymore. All of the Kandorian Kryptonians who were shrunk are now no more. The little people who Superman felt intimately responsible for their safety until they could be unshrunk are all dead. Just gone. So now the Kryptonian count has gone from thousands down to a very small handful with Superman, Jor-El, Kara, and then you also have General Zod and the little clan that are off with him in the future kind of timeline. But there really aren't very many Kryptonians left in the galaxy, and Rogol Zaar has made it his point to destroy them. Of course he's going to destroy the bottle city of Kandor. That's an easy target. Hello? They don't have superpowers in there. Not gonna lie, I was a little bit shocked that we no longer have a bottle city of Kandor. But not only for that reason, but also the fact that the destruction of the bottle city of Kandor will likely end up playing a larger role in the storytelling in Brian Michael Bendis' future Superman. Because apparently the next year of Superman comics and Action Comics is supposed to be really gargantuan. It's supposed to be huge. There's supposed to be some really big arcs and some more fairly big changes that are made. And I'm sure the bottle city of Kandor being destroyed will tie directly into some of that stuff. Another thing that I thought was really interesting with the Man of Steel miniseries was that at first we know that Lois is gone and so is John. Where are they? And we're not really shown what happens, but through the course of the 6 issues, in very much the Watchmen's Black Freighter storyline style, where we learn a little bit more as each goes, we learn that what's happened is that Jor-El, Superman's estranged father who he thought was dead, shows up and decides he wants to take little John across the cosmos to better his learning and understanding as a Kryptonian and not just become like his father who flies around in his baby clothes putting out fires. Yes, Jor-El knows that Superman does a lot of good, but he feels like Superman could do more and be better for the human race, and he wants John to become something special. And so he wants to take John all around the cosmos. Superman and Lois are obviously having none of it until Lois decides, well, I'll go with him and chaperone him across the cosmos and I'll get a story out of the deal. We'll just go for the summer. He'll be back in time for school. And so I thought that was really interesting that Brian Michael Bendis is actually, so far, using John and Jor-El together. I don't think he's just going to write them out of existence. I do think he's going to use this whole thing of John getting more perspective and going across the cosmos and across the galaxy as a springboard to change John's character. And that does kind of scare me because I like a young John Kent who is still very Superboyish. However, he can't stay that way forever. And I think that he wants to kind of tweak the character of John, make him maybe a little bit more grown up while trying to preserve that innocence. I'm not quite sure. So it's kind of scary that this will definitely be a springboard, as far as I see it, into other things. But I do think it's very cool that he brought the two together. And I'm sure we're going to learn about what happened out in the galaxy with Lois, Jor-El, and John Kent. I think that's going to be very interesting. And the whole thing is topped off with the fact that Jor-El gives Superman a communicator, so he's supposed to be able to communicate with them directly wherever they are in the galaxy. It's supposed to be tethered directly to them. And we'll get into that in a little bit later. One thing that I was tickled to see was an explanation finally as to why he's wearing a trunk suit, or why he changed his suit from the Reborn suit in the first place. And that's because when John and Lois go across the cosmos with Jor-El, Superman gives Lois his indestructible-ish super suit so that she can wear it. It'll, stick to her body. It won't be loose. It'll form to her body, and it'll keep her safe. And the symbol on the chest is recognizable, and hopefully people will treat her better because they recognize Superman's symbol. And long and the short of it is he gives her that suit to keep her safe. And so he ends up having to wear a different one. Whether he found it in a box under his bed or he fashioned a new one, they don't go into that, but they do give us an explanation. And it makes sense why we didn't find out sooner, because it's so integral to the story. Some other things that I thought were kind of interesting about the Man of Steel was, when you follow the fire storyline thread, where there's been fires happening all over Metropolis, and Superman and Melody Moore, which is how he meets Melody Moore, the fire chief. They're at a burning building in the first issue, and they're both trying to figure out who's doing it and trying to figure out the what and the where and the why about the whole deal. By the end of it, that thread, in much the same way that the Jor-El, Lois, John not being their thread is finished by the end, we learn something, that it's more than likely Superman that's been starting this rash of fires all across Metropolis. And to me, that means Brian Michael Bendis is setting something else up really big. I think that he keeps planting these seeds of very large things that are going to be taking place across both Superman titles. I think that's very interesting. And I think it really more than likely is Superman. I don't know how or why or the what, but I'm going to take it at face value and say that it probably is him and he doesn't know he's doing it. And then we also have the fact that in this miniseries, I found it really interesting that although Superman does manage to save the planet Earth from the same fate that Krypton had. In other words, in the way that they rewrote Superman's history, that Rogol-Zar is responsible for the destruction of Krypton by planting a device at its core which causes the planet itself to become unstable and the core to explode. Superman goes and takes that same kind of device and removes it from the core of Earth and saves Earth from that very same destruction. So he is the hero of the story in that way. I did find it kind of interesting that he is not the complete hero of the story yet. Because as far as the miniseries goes, it was actually Kara Zor-El who makes an appearance. She's in it all through it, but she makes an appearance at the end during the final battle when Superman's out in space with the device that he's removed from the planet to try and save it. She shows up out in space, rams into Rogol-Zar, removing his axe from him, which is what Superman believes is his power source. It's got a weird symbol on it. He needs to learn about this axe, and he can never get it away from him long enough. Supergirl flies up, rams into Rogol-Zar, separating him from his big axe, and then Superman is going, toe-to-toe again with Rogol-Zar out in space. When he gets out of the way, Kara blasts him with the Phantom Zone projector and then sending him on a nice long vacation to the Phantom Zone, tumbling forever and forever and forever into that hellish, unreal abyss. So technically, Supergirl is what dealt with Rogol Zaar for this storyline. Now, Superman admittedly did not want to use the Phantom Zone because he didn't see that as an actual solution. He sees it as a band-aid, temporary solution. And if you've been reading Superman comics, you know that Superman actually doesn't like the Phantom Zone. He feels like it's kind of immoral, and he wants to do better and be better even for the villains. And sentencing them to the Phantom Zone, because he's been there, he knows what it's like, he feels that is too immoral. He feels like that's unjust. And so for him, the Phantom Zone would ever only be to temporarily contain him. Although I do think it makes sense that Rogol Zaar ended up in the Phantom Zone, and this is touched on in the miniseries, because the Phantom Zone was discovered and then used for containing Krypton's most heinous criminals. I think that the genocide of an entire race and the destruction of their planet is definitely right up there with a crime that deserves being put in the Phantom Zone, don't you think? So by the end of the story, we learn that Superman might have been causing those fires. We learn that the Bottle City of Kandor has been destroyed. We learn that Rogol Zaar is much more powerful than people had realized, and he had to be contained in the Phantom Zone because Superman will never be able to go toe-to-toe with him and just defeat him. That's not going to be something that Superman can do. And furthermore, we have a Lois and John who have been taken out of the current Superman storyline and put somewhere else in the cosmos with someone who is essentially a stranger to the Man of Steel, his estranged father, Jor-El. Those are all pretty large things that he's done with this miniseries. And then that leads nicely into Superman issue number 1, because during the battle with Rogol Zaar, the communicator which was in the fortress got destroyed. So now Superman has no way of communicating with Lois and John. And that's really bad. And that's kind of how Superman issue number 1 starts. He's out in space, he's millions of miles away from Earth, and he's trying to figure out where they are. And then he bumps directly into a fleet of Dominators, a Dominator war fleet that is on its way to Earth to invade it. And Superman happens to catch it in this beeline and takes care of the whole problem, the whole threat, before it even makes its way to Earth. But it's taking care of the threat of the Dominators that he realizes, maybe I probably shouldn't be off-world for that long because Earth really needs me. It only serves to remind me why I'm here doing what I'm doing. Now, if we leave out the whole Martian Manhunter-Superman conversation that they have where Martian Manhunter is trying to convince Superman to become the world's leader, if we leave that out, because to me that doesn't really tie into the Man of Steel miniseries, that's more of a ties into the No Justice miniseries, there are other ways, aside from the fact that Superman has to deal with the fact that Lois and John are somewhere with someone who is essentially a stranger to him and he has no idea where they are or if they're safe. There are other things that tie into the Man of Steel from Superman issue number 1. That being, after the destruction of the Fortress of Solitude in the Bottle City of Kandor, and Superman and Supergirl and the rest of the League having a lit lantern kind of ceremony for the dead from the Bottle City of Kandor, a very beautiful scene in the Man of Steel, by the way, one of my favorite panels of the entire series. After that, they realize, well, the fortress has to go somewhere, and Superman decides to take a crystal and start anew in the Bermuda Triangle. He drops it in the ocean in very much a Superman Returns kind of fashion, like Lex did with his, only this island isn't infused with kryptonite, and he builds a new fortress, and he puts all that stuff, is the idea, that he was protecting that didn't get destroyed in the fortress, now goes in the new fortress. So no longer is Superman's fortress in the Arctic, and that's a pretty big change that Brian Michael Bendis is making. I know Superman's fortress has been in other places before, but the fortress in the Arctic has pretty much been there as well. But the final thing that I think ties into it, and I think is a really interesting story point, is the fact that by the end of the issue, Superman, who is clearly emotionally bothered by the death of the Kandorians, by the unknown whereabouts of his wife and son with his father, at some point near the end, something happens and the entire Earth is flashed inside of the Phantom Zone. Remember how I told you we would talk about that? We would touch on it later in the video. Well, this is later in the video, and the entire Earth has somehow been projected into the Phantom Zone, where Rogol Zaar is and all of Krypton's most heinous criminals. This is really bad. I think that connects to Man of Steel because they wouldn't even be doing this if Rogol Zaar wasn't there. And so we're definitely going to see more of Rogol Zaar in the next issue. He definitely isn't done. As far as I'm concerned, as a Superman fan, I've liked what Brian Michael Bendis is doing. I'm not comfortable with the Bottle City of Kandor being destroyed at this point. I like my Fortress of Solitude to be in the ice and snow of the Arctic, but the story seems to be an interesting one that he is concocting for us. I'm really interested in what he's doing, and I'm not ready to join the freakout train. I think that I'm going to wait and see exactly what he does before I lose my mind. And believe me, if he does something I really don't like, you'll hear it on this channel, because I'll talk about it. And I'll be like, he did this. But at this point, I'm not ready for that, and I highly recommend you pick up all 6 issues of the Man of Steel, even if you just wait until the graphic novel form comes out, and you also start reading Superman, because a lot of really big things are going to happen there, and I think that the storytelling is going to actually be pretty good at this point. It sucks that it seems like it's at the sacrifice of some things that we love, but I think it'll definitely be an interesting story nonetheless. I do recommend that you pick these books up, and I enjoyed them. Anyway, with that, I think I'm done the video, so thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video. I really appreciate that. If you liked the video, please leave a like on it. That way I know I'm doing something right. Anything to say at all, leave it down in the comments section below. And if you think you'd like to become a super friend and join the DC Squad, just hit the subscribe button. Remember to ding the bell so that you never miss a video, because otherwise you just won't get them. YouTube is funny that way. Oh, and finally, the P.O. Box will be down in the description below, because that wall right there is ready to go. We can start receiving mail and postcards and pictures, and I would love to showcase your stuff on this channel and read your letters and stuff like that. So the P.O. Box will be down in the description below, and I think that's it. Yes, that is it. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.